My name is Mirelda Voss, 72 years old, architect by training, widow by circumstance, and mother by mistake, or so it feels today. I've built hospitals, libraries, and a dozen homes across Oregon, but nothing prepared me for the sterile chill of a courtroom. The air tastes of paper and disinfectant, the kind of place where truth comes second to performance. The bailiff calls my name. I rise slowly, steady despite the tremor in my knee. Across the aisle, my daughter-in-law, Elira, hides a smile behind her manicured hand. The sound escapes anyway, sharp, breathy, deliberate. My son, Corin, sits beside her, jaw tight, eyes lowered. When he shakes his head, it isn't pity, it's dismissal, practiced and familiar. I remember that same look the day they told me to sign over the company I co-founded with his father. For your peace of mind, Corin had said then, his tone rehearsed, his wife's hand already on the papers. Now, years later, they sit in this courtroom believing the performance will end the same way. Judge Rhett Moreland adjusts his glasses, glances at the file, then at me. The gavel stalls midair. His voice falters. Mrs. Voss, he says, almost to himself. You are you, the Mirelda Voss who designed the Portland riverfront restoration. I nod once. His expression changes, a pale recognition spreading across his face. The courtroom hushes, as if the walls remember something the people don't. Elira's smirk fades. Corin looks up, uncertain for the first time. I take my seat, place my leather folder on the table, and rest my hand over it. Inside lies the reason I'm here. The blueprints, the ledgers, the evidence they thought time had buried. When the judge clears his throat and asks for opening statements, I don't move. Let them go first. I want to hear what story they've written about me this time. Outside, the rain presses against the courthouse windows, soft but relentless. I focus on that sound, the steady rhythm of persistence, and let it drown out every whisper in the room. The past may have brought me here, but it won't decide what happens next. Long before the courtroom, before the laughter and the shame, there was a blueprint. I still remember the smell of graphite and rain the day we drafted it, Henry and I, two dreamers at a wooden table in our old office above the Willamette River. We called our firm Voss & Co., though it was never just a company. It was a promise that good design could outlast greed. Portland's riverfront was our proudest workstone walkways, reclaimed oak benches, bridges that caught the afternoon light. Every signature on those plans bore both our names. When Henry died, the office fell too quiet. His chair stayed where it was, the jacket folded over the backrest as if he'd return after lunch. Corin stepped in then, eager, polished, and almost gentle. He spoke of expansion, of protecting the family brand. I believed him. I wanted to. But Elira arrived at his side soon after sharp, efficient, and smiling too often. She reorganized the office, replaced the staff I'd trained, and installed new computers with passwords I was never given. The first time I noticed the change was in the company's letterhead. My name had vanished. When I asked, Corin's voice tightened. Mom, you've been forgetting things, he said. We just don't want you overwhelmed. The next week, I received a letter from a court-appointed physician I had never met, recommending capacity evaluation for advanced cognitive decline. I didn't argue. I packed my drafting pens, the old blueprints Henry and I kept framed, and I left. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. I drove east until the skyline dissolved into trees and mist, finding refuge in a cabin near Mount Hood. At night, the wind crept through the boards, whispering across Henry's rolled-up plans stacked in the corner. I'd touch the paper edges and think of what we built structures meant to stand, even when everything else fell apart. Winter came early that year, pressing the forest into silence. The cabin had settled into its rhythm mornings with black coffee, afternoons sketching the same mountains I could no longer climb. I'd almost made peace with the quiet, until the day the mail truck struggled up the icy path and left a single envelope in the box. The handwriting stopped me cold. Dorian fell. Henry's attorney, dead for nearly a decade. Yet there it was, his name written in the deliberate, elegant hand I'd seen on countless contracts. The postmark was recent. Someone had sent this on his behalf. Inside, the paper smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. A trust declaration, sealed with the Voss Company emblem. Transferred dormant assets, properties, accounts, patents to my name alone. Attached to it, a single note in Dorian's hand. If you ever stand in court again, stand as the owner, not the accused. For a long while, I sat at the table without breathing. Snow gathered against the window like ash. The documents were real, dated, notarized, and witnessed. Everything Corin and Elira had claimed as theirs was legally still mine. I thought of Henry then, of the way he used to double-check every signature. Muttering, "Paper remembers longer than people." My hands shook as I placed the file beside Henry's old blueprints. It wasn't just money. It was proof that I hadn't imagined my place in the life we built. Proof that what they took wasn't theirs to keep. That night, I lit the fireplace and read through every clause until the ink blurred in the warmth. For the first time in years, the air in the cabin felt lighter, like the walls themselves exhaled. I slept little, but when dawn came, the decision was already there, quiet, solid, irreversible. It was time to go back. The city looked smaller when I returned, as if it had shrunk to fit the size of my disappointment. Portland's skyline still glimmered with glass and steel, but I saw only the outlines of buildings Henry and I once dreamed up together. I parked 2 blocks from the old office. The sign over the door still read Voss & Co., though the name meant nothing to the people inside now. Ellen Kavanaugh met me after hours, her hair grayer, her eyes restless behind thin frames. She had been Henry's accountant for 20 years, precise, loyal, invisible. "You shouldn't have come," she murmured, locking the door behind us. "They watch everything now." The office smelled of dust and printer ink. I followed her to the back room where the carpet had been replaced, the walls freshly painted. She knelt beside the radiator, prying loose a warped floorboard with a letter opener. Beneath it, wrapped in a faded blueprint tube, lay a stack of ledgers and 2 flash drives sealed in plastic. "They told me to destroy these after Henry's funeral," she said. I couldn't. I opened one ledger, and the weight of it felt almost physical. The handwriting was hers, but the digital printouts tucked inside were not. My name appeared dozens of times, authorization signatures approving fund transfers I had never seen. Each one led to the same destination, an offshore account in Zurich under the name Elira K. Voss. The room tilted slightly. I had to steady myself on the desk. Ellen turned away, whispering, "They'll ruin anyone who talks." They already tried with me. I closed the folder, slow and deliberate. "Then we won't talk," I said. "We'll file." She looked at me then, uncertain, frightened, but the smallest trace of relief crossed her face. I placed the ledgers in my bag, feeling the familiar balance of weight and purpose. For the first time in years, my hands no longer shook. I rented a narrow apartment above a florist on Alder Street, close enough to the courthouse that I could hear the noon bells. The space was simple white walls, a single window facing the Willamette, but it was the first place that felt mine in years. Every morning, I brewed coffee strong enough to wake the city and watch the river move like a slow thought. Portland hadn't changed much, though I had. The streets that once held my name now passed over me like water over stone. People I'd mentored walked past without recognition. That anonymity suited me. It was quieter to work unseen. The first visit I made was to Rhett Moreland, retired now. His gavel long put away, but his memory sharp. I found him tending his small garden behind a craftsman house in Laurelhurst. When he saw me, surprise flickered in his eyes, followed by something close to regret. "You came back," he said softly. "I never really left," I answered. We sat on a bench surrounded by fading hydrangeas. I handed him the trust papers Dorian Fell had sent, along with the ledgers Ellen helped recover. He read in silence, the wind tugging at the edges of the pages. When he finally spoke, his voice had the weight of confession. "I should have listened years ago," he said. "You were right about them. I didn't come for apologies. Judge, I came for direction." He folded the papers neatly. "Then here's what you need to remember. Mirelda Justice doesn't shout. It signs its name." By the following week, my attorney had filed the petition to reopen the Voss Trust. The response came faster than expected, Corin's countersuit, accusing me of mental incompetence and fraudulent interference. I read the notice by the window as rain traced slow lines down the glass. The city lights blurred beneath it, golden and unbothered. I felt neither fear nor anger, only the strange steadiness of someone who has already lost everything once and learned how to keep breathing after. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Morning light fell in sharp stripes across the polished floor, slicing the silence into careful order. Corin's legal team sat opposite me, 3 suits, all young, all confident. Their lead attorney, Mr. Dallin Pierce, spoke with the smoothness of someone who'd rehearsed disbelief. "Mrs. Voss," he began, "our position is simple. Your client, Mrs. Voss, suffers from cognitive decline and cannot manage complex finances. We submit into record 2 medical evaluations confirming this. My lawyer, Caleb Rourke, a patient man with a voice like tempered steel, didn't flinch. Those evaluations, he said, were never signed by a physician. They were auto-generated forms with forged credentials. We'll prove it." Pierce raised an eyebrow, smiling faintly, as though the word forged was theater. He presented the letters to the judge, each stamped and bound. Caleb followed with a small drive, the one Ellen had helped me prepare. "Metadata shows identical timestamps on all signatures," he explained. "One user ID, the same device. My client hasn't used that email since 2019. A hush spread through the courtroom. The judge adjusted his glasses, the papers trembling slightly in his hands. Corin looked toward me for the first time that morning. His eyes were tired, but pride kept them steady. From the gallery, Elira leaned forward, whispering just loud enough to be heard. "She's too old to remember her own passwords." I turned my head, slowly, until our eyes met. "Old enough to record everything," I said. My voice didn't rise, but it carried. Even the clerk paused. Pierce cleared his throat, flipping through his notes with exaggerated calm. Caleb's next exhibit appeared on the monitor, the full audit trail from Voss & Co.'s internal server. Each forgery glowed red on the screen like embers. By the time the judge called recess, Elira's smile had vanished. Corin stared down at his hands, tracing the edge of a legal pad. I gathered my papers one by one, the tremor in my fingers gone. The echo of the gavel felt almost merciful. It was the 3rd morning of testimony when Ellen Kavanaugh walked into the courtroom, her small frame wrapped in a gray coat despite the spring air. She carried a slim case clutched to her chest as though it contained something fragile. I caught her eye as she passed. She gave the faintest nod, the kind that says I'm ready, but only just. When the clerk swore her in, Ellen's hands trembled as she opened the case. Inside lay a black encrypted drive, labeled only with the date April 12, 2018. Caleb took it from her and presented it to the judge. "Your Honor," he said evenly, This recording was made in the Voss & Co.'s executive office by the firm's accountant during an internal audit meeting. The voice is Mrs. Mirelda Voss. Pierce rose at once. Objection, illegally obtained. Your Honor. Caleb didn't flinch. Chain of custody is clear. This was recovered from the company server under court order. The judge's eyes met mine briefly before he gestured to the bailiff. Play it. A burst of static filled the speakers, then Elira's voice bright, careless, unmistakable. It's done. I deleted her name from every document, even the registry. She'll never get near this company again. Corin's already signed the transfer once the paper's clear. She's legally gone. The words rippled through the room like electricity. Corin went pale. Pierce tried to object again, but the judge lifted a hand for silence. The recording continued, laughter, footsteps, the faint clink of a glass, then nothing. When it ended, no one moved. The hum of the ceiling vent was suddenly the only sound. Elira sat frozen, her mouth parted, as if searching for a version of herself that might explain it away. Ellen looked at me from the witness stand, eyes wet but steady. I pressed my palm to the table, grounding myself in the feel of the wood. For years, I'd imagined this moment and wondered what it would sound like when the truth finally spoke. Now I knew. It sounded like quiet. The final day came without warning. The air outside the courthouse was pale and still, as if the whole city had paused to listen. Inside, every seat was filled. The scent of coffee and old paper lingered under the hum of fluorescent lights. I sat at the plaintiff's table, calm in the way exhaustion sometimes feels like peace. The forensic specialist, a quiet man named Dr. Halden, finished his testimony. Each e-signature originated from the same IP address. He said, the device registered to Corin Voss. He paused, glancing toward me. No other users were found. Pierce tried to recover, pacing in front of the jury box, but his arguments had grown brittle. Every question turned back on itself. The evidence was too clean, too complete. When Caleb displayed the final chart tracing the offshore transfers, the room seemed to contract around the screen, line by line. The numbers spoke louder than anyone in the room. Judge Moreland's gavel struck once, sharp and final. The court finds the Voss Trust to be valid and under the rightful authority of Mrs. Mirelda Voss. The defendant's actions constitute willful forgery and financial misconduct. This court refers the matter to the state prosecutor for further review. The sound that followed wasn't applause or outrage, it was silence, heavy, absolute. Elira sat rigid. Her lipstick cracked at the corners, staring somewhere past me as if the wall could offer escape. Corin's shoulders collapsed forward, the boy in him flickering through the man's practiced composure. He looked at me once, brief and broken, then down again. I gathered the documents, every page that had carried my name through fire and disbelief. The clerk's hands shook as she handed me the ruling to sign. My pen moved slowly, deliberately, tracing each curve of the signature Henry once called the backbone of our family. When I stood to leave, the judge rose as well, eyes lowered in quiet respect. Outside the tall windows, rain had begun again, soft, forgiving, and endless. I stepped into it without an umbrella, letting it soak through the fabric of my coat, feeling for the first time in years the clean, undeniable weight of my own name. Spring returned to Portland gently that year, washing the hills in pale light and lilac scent. The old Voss house on Ridgeview Lane no longer looked like the monument it once was. I'd had the shutters repainted, the stone cleaned, and the nameplate on the gate removed. The space was quieter now, simpler, more useful. Inside, the rooms that once held meetings and arguments had been transformed. The parlor became a small office for the Voss Community Trust, a program offering legal guidance to seniors defrauded by family or caretakers. Each case file reminded me that betrayal was never unique, only repeated in different names. I worked alongside two young advocates from the city's legal aid network, Mara Quinn and Darren Holt, both patient, both learning the weight of quiet work. Some afternoons, we met clients over tea instead of at the desk. They came trembling with papers, with shame, with disbelief. I knew the look too well, the hollow stillness of someone who has discovered that love can be used as leverage. I let them speak, never once saying I understand. Understanding is earned, not claimed. In the front hall, beside the door, I hung a small brass hook shaped like an open key. It held two tags, one marked mine, one guest. Above it, engraved on a narrow plate, were the words, "Home by consent only." It wasn't decoration. It was reminder. Every boundary, every piece I had rebuilt, had to be chosen, not assumed. When the day's work ended, I often sat by the window overlooking the garden Henry once tended. The tulips had bloomed early, red against the pale grass. I listened to the city breathing beyond the hills and thought of how love, when left unchecked, had once nearly ruined everything I built. Now it had its place no longer command, just choice. By autumn, the rhythm of my days had gentled. Mornings began not with legal filings, but with the hum of students gathering at Portland State. Notebooks open, eyes curious. The university had invited me to teach a short course in ethical architecture, how design and decision intertwine, how the structures we build shape more than skylines. I accepted without hesitation. I wanted to speak, finally, from a place no one could silence. The classroom was small, lined with tall windows that caught the soft drizzle drifting from the river. Most of my students were younger than the company I'd once built, bright and impatient, eager to learn the mechanics of fairness without yet understanding its cost. I never told them my story directly. I simply used examples, contracts that hid injustice, signatures that carried deceit, foundations that cracked because their builders mistook control for love. They listened differently each week, less to the diagrams and more to the pauses between them. One morning, after a lecture on professional integrity, a girl lingered by the desk. "You talk like someone who lost everything," she said. I smiled. "Not lost," I answered. "Rebuilt." When the semester neared its end, I wrote the final sentence on the board in broad, clear strokes. Love built me. Boundaries kept me standing. The chalk dust shimmered faintly in the afternoon light. For a moment, the room was utterly still, as if even the city outside paused to listen. Later, walking home, I passed the courthouse where it all began. The steps were wet from rain, but the clouds were breaking, the sky softening into gold. I paused beneath the awning and watched the sunlight return to the windows, slow and forgiving. It struck me then how every battle I'd fought had not been for victory, but for clarity to prove that truth, once spoken quietly enough, could outlast the noise made against it. I stepped back into the rain, my coat open, my hands unburdened, and let the light find me again.